Welcome to a tiny resort village that has twice hosted the Winter Olympic Games, hosted last year's Youth Olympics, and is one of the most beautiful spots on Earth. It calls itself the top of the world. This is St. Moritz, Switzerland. Welcome back, everyone. The temperature has warmed up quite a bit since earlier today. Run number 1 in the doubles competition, now well above freezing as the sun is peeking through here in the Swiss Alps. I'm Tim Singer. Let's take a look at this track. It is a natural track built each year in November, shaped with these curves following the same basic but not exact line from start to finish. As you see, that double start is a little lower in the track. In a moment, I'll be joined by my broadcast partner, Gordy Shear, but first let's look at the top finishers from run number 1, some familiar names and one big surprise. This is not the surprise. Rieder and Rassner, one of 3 Italian teams in the top 7 in the standings. The defending world champions who took their 4th straight title last week, Egert Bennigan in second, but everyone's chasing a pair of young Latvians, 20-year-old and 21-year-old Martins Vats and Roberts Pluma. Earlier this year, they earned their first ever podium. Now they're in position to win their first ever race in this just their first season on the World Cup. They'll be the last to go as they count them down from 24 to 1 here in run number 2. So welcome back, everyone. And now we welcome in 2-time Olympian, actually 3-time Olympian, Gordy Shear, the silver medal winner in 1998. Welcome back, Gordy.
Tim, thanks so much for having me here. Appreciate it. Exciting race after that first run.
Sorry, didn't want to get your Olympic credentials wrong there. Yes, you were we'll talk a little bit about 1992 because a lot of that storyline is lurking over the next 12 months for many of these double sleds. We start things off with Mikiewicz and Babora. As we've talked about quite a bit over the last few weeks, these are 2 teenagers, to say the least, 15 and 16 years old, from the Ukraine.
I can't imagine being 15 and 16 and competing in a World Cup event. I mean, it was terrifying competing into junior World Cup level at that age. What a great experience, though. I mean, the opportunity to do what they're doing today will definitely pay dividends later on in their career. They'll be able to deal with just about anything.
Quiet, natural track. I'm really interested to see how their time shakes out against their run number 1. Obviously, it's a different looking run, but it'll give us an idea of what this track is doing right now, late morning in Switzerland.
Yeah, the lines that these guys are driving are really just spot on at this age. Is incredible.
Portago, the finish curve, and it's a 56.224. That is better than 7/10 faster than their first run time. Hey, Gordy, in 1992, you and Chris qualified for the Olympics in Albertville, La Plagne. That was a bit of a spot for a couple of young American teams going for that second position. But what's it like when you're really in contention? Are you saying to yourself, I don't belong here yet, or are you saying I definitely belong here, or is it something in between?
Something in between. You know, it's just a progression. Usually, in the case of Chris Thorpe and I, my teammate, it took us a long time to really get to that. It was such a slow climb, but you know, for some of the athletes that you see competing today, some of them are you know, coming up so quickly with success early. It's just, it's a much different experience than what Chris and I had.
It is stressful for all of them now, especially these countries that have 3 sleds all Olympic worthy. It's going to be, all of a sudden teammates are not going to become the most friendly teammates over the next 12 months. Here's Shikdane and Opria from Moldova, 23rd place after run number 1. And early in the action here, before we get to the top 12 or so, we definitely want to address your questions, comments, criticisms, and corrections. You can find us on Twitter at Luge Announcer. Also, feel free to email us, luge.announcer@gmail.com. And a question, Gordy, comes in from Craig, who says, generally, how much attention, if any, do the sliders and coaches pay to the velocity through the speed trap? Does it matter at all, or is it just for the viewers?
Well, it's certainly an indicator. It's not the be-all and end-all. But the reason it's a little bit less of an indicator than you'd see in say, bobsled or skeleton, because the feet can come into play so much more. Your feet can go low through the. It's not a radar. It's based on speed between timing eyes. So if your feet are low at one point and then high in the other, it doesn't necessarily give you an accurate reading. That said, it is an indicator.
Okay. No, I mean, you hit it best. An indicator, but not the be-all, end-all. Now, our third sled, and the first from Romania. As you see, 4 names, a lot of names. Like between the two of these guys, we have 6 names: Tudor Stefan Honderek and Alexandru Valentin Alanai. A mere 2 seconds out of the lead after run number 1. So what they'll need to do, Gordy, here is have a near perfect run and then hope for 22 crashes.
Yeah.
Trouble out of Nash in the Dixon corner, and you can ill afford that. These speeds are still so slow.
Yeah, a slow speed mistake really, really amplifies. They had 0.7 of a second advantage, and it just evaporated. But the problem is, if you don't nail that start curve just perfectly and come within, a hair of the left wall twice, it's very challenging to keep it on line. Really, there's a lot of opportunity for problems with that start corner.
Fastest double sleds earlier today were hitting 77 miles per hour. It's going to be very interesting to see the types of speed we see from the men later today as they start significantly higher on this track. Romania into the lead, Honderek and Alanai, 152.510, the 2-run combined time. Just so beautiful down here, Gordy, at the finish area. It's a big open field. The sun is generally shining all over the place.
Yeah, and here you see they didn't hit the left wall. They just drove a little too deep into the start curve, which set up problems in Nash-Dixon for them. And they were lucky to keep the sled shiny side down.
In normal years, there are thousands of spectators on bleachers down at the finish, and if you're hungry, there's a pizza joint right across the street from the finish area. Hoy and Lekiewicz now on course. The first of 3 from Ukraine. 56.922 in run number 1.
Saw a little bit of movement in their paddles and in their settle, and it wasn't much of an issue, but not ideal. You want everything to be straight, synchronized, and smooth. The 53rd European Championships, scheduled for next season, are slated to take place here in St. Moritz. So, Gordy, just the very fact that they're returning 2 years in a row to this track, that bodes well for the future. Everyone's excited to be here. We're excited to cover this race. Yeah, it's such an unusual track to slide on, and visually it just looks like old-time sledding.
Like our longtime colleague John Morgan says, what Yankee Stadium is to baseball or Augusta National is to golf, St. Moritz is to sliding sports. Not as much luge over the years, but certainly the history and even the birth of, in many ways, of the sledding competitions was right here.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you have such a unique facility sitting right next to this track. You've got the Cresta Run, which has some absolutely insanely built corners, namely shuttlecock.
And now, in a nice recent development over the last couple of years, that Cresta Run features men and women. It was
about time.
Yes, it is. Okay, Stakov and Lisetsky from Ukraine. Sled number 5 off the start, Monty's Bolt, and through the Nash-Dixon curves that lead into the famous horseshoe.
A nice line at the start. You really want to minimize distance and get nice and early on that right side going into horseshoe, which is exactly what they did. Smooth line going into telephone, and then into the forest here. This series of long sweeping corners. Really just get early in and let those sleds do their thing. Very gentle guiding in terms of steering.
Top 20 in all but one race this year for this Ukrainian pair. They finished as high as 14th twice this season.
A little foot tap out of Günter Sachs and a little foot tap out of Martin now.
Nonetheless, they take over the lead, 151.131, 0.3 of a second clear on the early sleds. Run number 2, St. Moritz, Switzerland. This is the World Cup finale. Gordy, they packed a lot into a short amount of time with the World Cup opener just, 12 weeks ago in Innsbruck.
Yeah, what a compressed season this has been. I think it's probably been a pretty exhausting season for all those involved. Obviously the athletes, the coaches, and as well as our friends in the broadcast side sitting in the TV trucks.
It's been amazing. A lot of tests and mostly positive. I would say 99% positive COVID tests.
Negative.
Negative, sorry. That would not be nearly as good. Positive news for the negative test.
Right.
It's like a Seinfeld episode with George and his white discolorization. Now, Zitland Zerban on course for Romania. They have a pretty good advantage over the sled currently in the lead.
It was interesting to look at the front driver's right elbow. You can see some padding, and that's a lot of padding, actually. I'm wondering if he's protecting an injury, but, in a sport like luge that's timed to the thousandth of a second, and aerodynamics are so important, to be wearing a pad of that size, you don't see that often, so I suspect he may have smashed his right side in training at some point.
Remaining in the green at this point.
Nice looking run. I love the all you hear is the wind noise and no sled vibrations.
It's amazing, and that's just simply because there is no cement under the ice.
Yeah, there's basically it's the natural ice just absorbs all of the. It's two things: the natural ice absorbing all of the chatter and noise, and also it's the fact that this track is just phenomenally smooth. It's like flying almost when it's built right, like it is today.
It's Romania leading over a pair of Ukrainian sleds, and Romania in 4th place. That's the top 4. We've only gone 6 deep now, out of 24 here in run number 2. Congratulations to Yin Young Park and Young Myung Cho. Yesterday they captured the season's points title in Nations Cup, which of course is a good news, bad news thing, Gordy. The good news is they were pretty steady in this qualifying race week in and week out. The bad news is they failed to make it into the seeded group.
Yeah, good news, bad news is a good way to put it. But anytime you're on any podium internationally, it's something to celebrate. And being a smaller luge nation like Korea, they'll take it.
They were, of course, as we've mentioned over the season, scheduled to host a race this month. It was going to be the second to last race of the season before the Olympic test in Beijing. That Pyeongchang race was moved to Innsbruck, Beijing to here in St. Moritz, as every race has been held in mainland Europe this season.
Yeah, as much as everybody would have loved to have gone to Pyeongchang, it's also, this is a nice consolation prize being here in St. Moritz.
Nice bottom part of the track. The
Definitely.
lead for South Korea, Park and Cho. I'm not sure everyone wanted to go to Pyeongchang, but everyone definitely wanted to go to Beijing, right?
Yes, that is true. Holding the Olympic test race in the same season as the Olympics is unusual. It's happened before. It's unusual. This is Martin now into Portago. A little bit of right wall, but they stayed cool. The whole ride, the front driver was sitting up just a little bit too much. creating a little bit extra aerodynamic drag, but he wanted to get a look at what he was doing.
Now Poland, Wojciech Chmielewski and Jakub Kowalewski. Still just young athletes, 25, 26 years old. But they've been on the World Cup now, I want to say 6 or 7 seasons.
And they actually meant to go into a start there and slip of the right hand on the handle.
That's great restraint. And he got 45 seconds when that light turns green, which probably just there is a good example of you better be ready to do it early in case something happens, right?
Yeah. And maybe there were some nerves. It was also, no matter what, it was a good chance to reset. Rough entrance into telephone coming off the famous horseshoe corner. Horseshoe is actually the only corner that's actually built and has a solid wall behind it.
Rock, I think it's
yes,
stone wall,
correct.
Right?
Yep, stone wall.
Great fact. Ooh, the feet tip down. I mean, they're carrying some pretty good speed here, but not with a great deal of confidence or relaxation.
Yeah, I'd say you hit it on the head. It's just not a lot of confidence looking at this run.
54.823 applause from the top man, Chmielewski. It's about 1,500 faster than their first heat. Still was a good finish to the season. Not a great start of the season for these two Poles. I believe they were top 10 last week. Yeah, 8th place at the World Championship.
And that's a good result. Seems like they were just, if they were celebrating after the race is over with not a great looking run, they're probably just pumped to, that maybe they just never got into sync with this track.
Tomas Verchek and Maciej Schmish 2 days ago, or yesterday morning actually, they captured the Nations Cup gold medal. Let's see, we've got 9 paddles on this flat start ramp off of Monty's Bolt into Nash Curve.
Yeah, it's second probably to the ramp in Koenigsee.
That's right. The lower ramp, the women's ramp in Winterberg.
That's true.
Also is pretty flat. The great part about this track, Gordy, of course, like Koenigsee, back-to-back weekends of tracks that the athletes do not use the numbers, they use the names.
Yeah, that's true. They don't even give numbers to these turns. You know them by name or you don't know them.
Meantime, we in Lake Placid that know that track so well, we talk about shady or chicane or devil's sky, but the athletes don't. It's all about the number.
Correct.
54.799 and a 2-run combined time, good enough to put Slovakia into the lead. 9 sleds in, 13 still to come. 15 rather.
Nice position. Aerodynamically optimized. You can see him pick his head up just a bit.
It's been a fairly decent season for Yannick Mueller and Armin Frauscher. In their 3rd year together as a doubles team, these two former singles sliders have 3 podiums, or 2 podiums rather, to go along with the 4th place. Top 10 in every race except 1. They're in 6th place in the World Cup standings. Probably not going to crack the top 5 because they trail the Italians, Rieders and Rassner, in the points.
And the Italians have really come on strong in the second half of the season.
Well, you recall the depth of Italy back in the 90s when they captured gold and silver at the 94 Olympics. A race that I believe you finished 5th, if I know my luge history.
Yeah, very good.
And that was really the last of the great Italians. I mean, Planksteiner and Hasselrieder had an Olympic medal. Ooh, double tap for Mueller-Frauscher of Austria. But they're still 0.2 of a second out. Let's see how much of that advantage they give away here. about 700ths. 149.401. Austria out in front. Slovakia, Poland, second and third at the moment.
They tapped walls, but not at too much cost, I don't think. I didn't see a lot of skidding, and while you never want to hit a wall, it's the skidding that really kills you. And here it is, out of Devil's Dyke, just out a little. Just a problem on the exit there.
Robin Goyaka and David Gahm from the Hochsauerland of north-central Germany. Goyaka, the big, tall top man. Gahm, much smaller. They finished 6th in the overall last year in the World Cup, but they're back in 19th place this season due to just part-time competition, including missing out last week at the World Championships.
Seeing some aggressive driving off of Horseshoe. It seems like Horseshoe is always a challenge in one way or another. And we saw the Austrians in the first run actually taking some what we call hook steers, where they're breaking form and lifting on the opposite runner to really get a hard drive in the middle of the course. Losing some time here.
Sort of been a real head-scratching couple of seasons for this duo. They found a lot of time in the last few curves, going from 4,000ths back to 1,200ths up.
Don't forget the Austrians lost a lot of time.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Very well put. They have a chance to move up 3 or 4 positions. The splits are very tight among the next 3 or 4 sleds.
Nice form. Head back, feet up. I believe that's heading into Horseshoe.
Well, ending the season on a high note, they hope, but it's going to take a lot more work for them to even crack the World Cup roster next year, let alone outside Olympic ambitions. Denisov and Antonov, they have an Olympic medal. That was silver in 2014. But Gordy, as successful as this season's been for Italy in doubles, it's been somewhat confounding for Russia. The retirement of one athlete, very few top 5 performances for any of the Russian teams.
Confounding is right. Because they've been so strong in previous few years, they've just kind of fallen off.
We haven't seen Albert Demchenko on tour this year. I mean, he's sort of not the coach, but he's the sport director of this program.
Yeah, rough in telephone. Definitely losing a little bit of time here. Let's see if they can make some of it up in the middle section of the course.
1300ths back. Now through Tree Bridge and Gunter Sachs. It shoots them down to this long left-hand Martineau curve.
Making a little time.
Oh, by just 100th of a second, 13,000ths to be precise. As I mentioned, Goyaka and Gahm have a chance to move up a couple of spots, possibly into the top 10. That's more of a long shot, but 11th very realistic.
I think the start is holding these guys back a bit. Much like the U.S. team with Mastering Tournament. Rough, definitely rough into telephone.
And I don't want to chalk that up to age, Gordy, because you look at Tatiana Hufna and you look at Rita Rasna, and these are veterans in the sport. Tatiana, of course, retired now, but they were and are among the fastest starters in their sport well into their 30s.
And Johannes Ludwig on the men's side.
Exactly. Gott and Schuff now on course, the second of the 3 from Austria. Bottom man Ricardo Schuff from a town in Austria named Imst. Does that ring a bell to you, Gordy?
A lot of history in Imst, and they're about to make some new history with a brand new shorter length competition course, focused more at the junior level.
Right, in nearby Blue Dents.
Blue Dents.
And Imst was one of the last natural tracks,
Natural,
right?
correct, yeah. They still use it, I believe.
It was on the World Cup into possibly the early 90s, late 80s.
I think they use it for development still. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm in no position to do that. 500s back, and they didn't do themselves any favors on the finish curve as they dropped back another tenth or so. Third place right now, it's Germany leading over Russia, and then a pair of Austrian sleds, third and fourth, Slovakia in fifth. Well, I've called it pretty well so far for Robin and David of Germany.
Yeah, definitely.
They could move up. This is the last sled, I believe, that they have a chance to move ahead of, and it would put them in 11th place. Sivolo Kashkin, Konstantin Korshunov, both 22 years old. Korshunov, the bottom man from the city of Dimitrov, not far from Moscow, and of no small note, that's where the Rapilov brothers are also from.
Well, really far extension for the first part of their start. Very unusual. It's kind of an old school moving forward. We call that a block. They really went way forward in the block.
This is Horseshoe, and this dips down quite a bit. Some years we have an ice camera right there in the exit of Horseshoe. It's a very cool shot to see the sleds, all three sliding sports disciplines, come out of Horseshoe.
Yeah, this midsection of the course, it's so cool that the corners are just super long and flowing and very smooth. It's like you're flying, and then you've got these 4 right-hand corners in a row, which is not something you see anyplace else on the World Cup Tour.
Drew Martineau still in the red, and as we mentioned earlier, confounding the Russians. But they do find some time down at the bottom by 0.003 of a second, denying Goyaka and Gam another place up the standings. Kashkin and Korshunov will be the highest placing Russian on this day, but Gordy, they'll be hard pressed to crack the top 10 here.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised to see them go into the green, given the fact that their bottom section, really from Gutter Sachs through Martineau and Portigo, didn't look all that great. A little bump on the start as well, but hey, they'll take it.
Top 10 now coming up from St. Moritz, Switzerland. This is the American pair of Chris Masner and Jason Turdeman. And Jason was saying a few days ago, actually in a message to you, Gordy, that the track here is so insanely smooth and quiet. But he also mentioned as a visual, the drivers of the track have a challenge because it's so white, it makes it very difficult to see.
Yeah, there's no curved tops or roofs or natural or coverings or anything. Everything is made out of snow and ice here. So there aren't any of those artificial concrete and steel structures to use as references that the athletes will often do.
The Americans' advantage over Russia was about 1/10 of a second at the beginning of the run. They're not one of the fastest starting teams, so we'll see what this first split out of Horseshoe shows us. They've opened it up. That's a good sign for the USA.
Yeah, it is definitely a good sign. Definitely nice flowing few corners, a little rough between out of Horseshoe and into Telephone. But I think with that kind of margin, these guys should be able to hang on and hopefully build here a little bit.
They have lost about 500s. Let's see how these bottom curves do out of Gunther Sachs. Now Martineau, right down the lower line. I guess that's the route to take to the finish. Nicely done. Second fastest run of the heat. Fastest overall. Guaranteed top 10. I believe that might equal their best result of the season. This abbreviated season for the Americans.
All in all, they should definitely be happy, given what Chris has gone through in the preseason with his elbow and shoulder surgeries. trying to figure out new sleds. And, they've got to be happy. And just a little bit rough, but Chris is a seasoned veteran, hung on, got the sled right back online.
Guaranteed top 10, and that does match their best result of the season. I officially can tell you, and they could move up a spot, Gordy. They let's see what their advantage is. It's only about 200ths. They trailed this Latvian team, but Udramovic and Kalnins may have underperformed in run number 1, considering they had the fastest time of the seeded group training yesterday, the final day of training.
Right. That shows that there's definitely potential to go faster than they did. I don't recall seeing any major issues. And that was certainly smoother than Chris and Jason. But they are sitting up a bit on their sled.
Yeah, that's clear with the top man, Udramovic. But on balance, the Latvian sleds were faster than anyone equipment-wise in run number 1.
Definitely these sleds are running.
This will be a telling split time here, and they've opened it up. Good speed, 76.2. They'll have to give a lot away here, and they do around the finish curve. So they fall just one spot back. That's incredible after one of the larger mistakes we've seen this morning, Gordy. So the Americans they better their best result of the year as they're now in the top 9, but that was handed to them. I mean, that would have been a 0.3 of a second lead.
Yeah, they were definitely accelerating and building time. It's frustrating for this Latvian team. Just a little right wall tap going into Portago, and that was all it took. You can see the frustration.
Even when you move up the standings, you share your friends and fellow competitors' pain, right, Gordy?
Yeah, you'll take it, but you've also been on the other side of that, so it's not good form to gloat and celebrate, because it could come back to you at any race.
The two Tobys now on course, and our congratulations to bottom man Toby Alt on the birth of his son last week, just before the World Championships on his home track. And now the 4-time Olympic gold medalists finding themselves in an unusual 8th place position after run number 1. They're still quick at the start into their 30s, and the fastest start time at 3.265.
It's so much fun to watch these guys start. They're so explosive and in sync. Just thousands of repetitions in that start motion, perfecting it. A lot of time in the summer months, studying videotapes. It's their job to be fast on the track and at the start.
And we talk so much about Felix Locke, the Bavarian, having the great George Hackel to mentor and train him. But the Tobys have been working under the tutelage of Patrick Leitner for all of these years as well, Olympic gold medalist.
Yeah, Leitner and Resch, a legendary doubles team.
54.32. Let's see how that would have done in run number 1. And in some ways it's tough to compare. That would have been a 6th place time. So not a lot better than the 8th they were in. But still, this is a different run, and now we'll see if they can move up the ladder a little bit. It's a long shot for them to get into the top 3 in the World Cup overall points. It will end up in 4th, and I'm not sure when the last time the Tobys were out of the top 3 for the season.
Yeah, a bit of a surprise.
The Bavarians are done. Still ahead, Egert Bennigan of Germany. On deck, the Austrian World Cup champions, but now the first of 3 from Italy in the top 7 after run number 1. Emanuel Rida and Simon Keinswaldner.
Italians have definitely had a doubles renaissance late this season. It's been a lot of fun to watch. Their starts have definitely improved this year. They've always been great starters, but Tatjana Hufner as their start coach, they've seen a significant jump forward.
Absolutely, especially with the next two teams. Although these two just put down the second fastest start behind the Tobys, but they're trailing Bendel and Arlt here. But it's close, 500ths of a second.
We'll see what happens in the 4 right-hand corners if they can try and catch some of that back. They're losing it.
First of 3 from South Tyrol to the finish. They drop back 1 position. Toby and Toby move up from 8th to 7th. Reader Keinswaldner will be in the top 10. It's very likely Italy will put 3 sleds in the top 10. Last week, the World Championships, they had 3 in the top 7.
A little bit at a loss as to why they lost the time that they did in this run. They seem to gain it back in the last split, but not enough to stay in front of the Tobys.
Well, now a victory ride here on the World Cup for Thomas Stoy and Lorenz Kola, as Diana Eitberger, not in team uniform, watching action from the side of the track. And Stoy Kohler captured the World Cup, clinched it 2 weeks ago in Eagles on their home track. Thomas was saying that the recipes for success this winter was hard work during the summer, a lot of work on the sled, and he just said how cool it was to come back from his awful injury last year, a broken leg in 2 places. And they were just hoping to be competitive, and they were more than that, Gordy.
I can't tell you how much respect I have for being able to pull something like that off. Coming back from such a major injury, physically and mentally, it's just such a challenge. And full credit to these guys for not only coming back, but winning the World Cup title. It's just amazing. And
Lorenz was saying they were in every newspaper, all sorts of requests for interviews right after they clinched it. And it's a proud tradition. It started years ago, but the Schiegels and the Lingers and Pence and Fischler, and now Stoy and Kohler. They don't have the lead here, but they do have the bib showing World Cup champions, and they'll wear that for the next 12 months.
Congratulations to these guys. That's really good for them.
And Toby Alt there to give him congratulations down at the bottom.
Yeah, very nice. A lot of camaraderie in doubles. You see him hook steering in horseshoe. It's an indication of how much drive they feel that they need to get the sled around the corner. And what they're doing is actually lifting the non-driving runner while pushing down on their driving runner with the opposite leg.
Now Ivan Nagler and Fabian Malaya. They sit pretty well right now compared to the Tobys, a 1/10 of a second up on them, which maybe is the last of the sleds that the Tobys have a chance to catch, but that's a lot to make up. 10th. You talk about the camaraderie, Gordy. I remember so well the German team of Skell and Voller used to be among your biggest rivals, but you guys would go out and celebrate after the Saturday race. They were your buddies.
Yes, and still are today. In fact, I was just talking to Stefan between runs, and I know he's watching, so hello, Stefan.
Now smooth line in the horseshoe. It's the fastest start time, 3.251. That's not a surprise in light of what Gordy was just talking about regarding the Italian start times. Let's see this next split. That'll be how they're trending. Into the red, but now into the green by 1,000th of a second.
It's all going to come down to these final 4 right-hand corners and how much speed they can carry into the flatter and uphill Martinau and Portagos corners.
Now 400ths, not perfect lines down here at the bottom, and they don't catch up. So they give away a 1/10 of a second and more. Vendel and Alt are in the top 5. Not bad considering they began the run in 8th place. And let the fun begin for the Italians. Gordy, 3 strong Italian teams, 11.5 months to decide which 2 of those 3 will make next year's Olympics.
It's going to be interesting to watch with all this talent. And it was also interesting to watch the splits because they were back 400ths going into Martinau and Portago and then brought it to 200ths. I think if they had a little more distance, they might have been able to bring it back in.
This will likely be where the Toby's run comes to an end, as these Latvians have a quarter of a second advantage on them. Andras and Juris Šīks, they've been about as steady as any sled, any discipline this year, with solid results. They opened the season with a 14th. Since then, nothing worse than 7th, including a pair of podiums last week in the World Championship sprint and doubles races.
These guys are just an incredible team. I saw a little bit of ice being cut in the start curve, so kind of not an ideal place to cut ice. Some spray coming up from underneath the sled, but they're holding on to their lead. They're not losing too much. Maybe they lost a couple hundredths of a second there, but expect them to build speed here at the bottom.
That has been the trend for Latvians, certainly today, and they are. So they're back up where they began now. Now can they put some pressure on the final 3 and make their way onto the podium?
This is where I would expect them to do it. Nice line early into Martinau. Better line into Portago than their first run.
Incredible run, 54.168. That moves them into the lead, well out in front, 1 spot away from the podium, which would be their 8th of the season. And they are poised and ready, it would appear, Gordy, to show up for their 5th Olympic Games next year in China.
Just incredible. Just amazing. You know, really from the telephone shamrock section of this course on, they built almost 0.2 of a second. And that's in those gentle flowing corners.
It's been a season to remember for these two Südtirolians, Ludwig Rieder and Patrick Rasna. Finished 7th at the 2014 Olympic Games, but back in 15th at the last Olympics in South Korea. But they have been among the best in the world all season long. 5th in the World Cup standings, 3 times on the podium. Their first career victory, that was a couple of weeks ago in Innsbruck. Only the 4th fastest start time. Now all of those times are pretty tight. They're going to need to be clean here. Look at that, 1/10 of a second up already.
Yeah, I would say that they got to where they are based on the merit of the lines that they drove up top in Nash-Dixon. Coming out of that start corner, their lines were just spot on.
Now they've lost a bit back, but still an advantage better than they had at the start. They were only 0.22 up on the Latvians.
I think this might be close.
0.006 of a second. Who will be on the podium? These two veteran teams having great seasons. A bit of a skid, and they fall back 1 position, but a distant 0.14 back. It's Šīks and Šīks of Latvia. Another week, another podium. In fact, the final 5 races on the World Cup, the 2 Latvians ended up 1st, 2nd, or 3rd.
Amazing. I tell you, I know these guys are beating themselves up, but I honestly think that it was just too tall of an order to catch the Latvians. They were just building so much speed down at the bottom. Again, I see their frustration, but it's hard to imagine a scenario where they weren't going to finish behind the Latvians, unfortunately.
2 remain now here at the World Cup finale. Šīks and Šīks of Latvia out in front. Now Tony Egert and Sacha Bennigan. You just saw the bib, world champions, 2021, 2020, 2019, and 2018.
You hear a grunt at the start. These guys really want to win this race, I'm sure.
In the correction, 2017. Of course, there were no Worlds in 2018 when they won the Olympic bronze medal. Now into Horseshoe. The next split time will be on the steep exit, the drop off of this famous curve. 600s up.
Rough into Horseshoe just a little bit.
This will clinch them second place in the World Cup overall standings.
Behind, this is going to be very interesting, a very interesting finish. You can see positioning the sled, trying to get early into that first of the series of 4 right-handers, 7/100ths of a second behind.
Will they drop off of the podium? And they skid. An inauspicious finish to a great team as they are off of the podium in the moment. Actually, they sit in third ahead of their German teammates, but really in danger of dropping off of the podium.
Wow, that was a surprise. Just goes to show that even the most experienced teams can make mistakes at times.
By finishing ahead of the Tobies, I believe they have cemented their spot in tomorrow's relay competition. So they have a chance to redeem themselves a little bit.
Yeah, just carrying sideways pressure off of Martin now into Portago and skidding the whole way through.
It hasn't been a memorable season for Tony and Sasha. They had a 15th place finish and a 22nd place finish in 2 races. But all the same, they will end up in second place in the World Cup standings, I believe. I guess there's an outside chance the Latvians could jump over them. We'll see when they add up those points in a moment. Now this race boils down to 2 relative unknowns. That is an understatement. Rookies of the year. Martins Bots and Roberts Pluma of Latvia. This is their first year on the World Cup, Gordy, 21 and 20 years old. They earned a bronze medal at the European Championships. Now they are in position to win their first ever World Cup race.
I can't imagine what's going through their heads right now. A little bit rough in telephone, but look at that, almost 2/10 coming out of telephone and heading into this open middle section of the track. Really want to let the sled flow and do its thing. They're building losing just a hair of time, but I don't think they're going to lose this race if they can keep it on line.
Now it's a question of how they can handle the pressure of being in the lead after run number 1. So far, so good. It's not perfect down here, though.
They're losing a little time, but they got it.
They hang on. So congratulations, Martins, Bots, Roberts, Pluma, everyone applauding these 2 young, new champions.
Oh, that's great.
That would have been the biggest money-making bet at the beginning of the year if you had placed a wager on these 2 winning a World Cup race.
Yeah, that's exciting to see the young team from Latvia come out, win their first race. Oh, that's just so exciting. I'm so happy for these guys.
I believe they're going to end up somewhere like top 7, top 8 in the World Cup standings, and they missed a race. They did not race at the Königssee World Cup.
They were definitely a little bit offline down in the bottom, coming out of Gunter Sachs and going into Martin now, a little bit offline going into Portago, but they were just really, really graceful and poised and sliding beyond their years.
Bots and Pluma, 2 smiling Latvians, leading a 1-2 Latvia finish. The Italians third, the Germans off of the podium, and Goika Gam in 12th place. The Americans with their best finish of the year